There is sort of a little bit of a cliche or a school of thought that when times are dark, that's when the best art emerges, the best music. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that, and do you feel need in your art to address in your own songs and lyrics what's going on?
Well, it's interesting because some of my favorite music was made in the 60s and 70s, and of course a lot of that was during the height of the civil rights movement and the anti-Vietnam War movement. I think there was a lot of urgency, and I've talked about this before, where I think some of that urgency came from the fact that there was a draft, mm-hmm. and so that a lot of young people who maybe in this generation can ignore bigger issues of like the war and things like that, they couldn't ignore it back then because they were literally, as soon as they turned 18, they could have been sent to Vietnam, unless they had bone spurs. So I think that sense of urgency permeated the youth during that time, and I think it affected the music in a lot of ways. Even though all these crises are happening in America right now and people are concerned about them, I do think a lot of youth don't feel as connected to them as they did back in that era. I'm not saying we should implement the draft, I'm just saying that a side effect of us not having the draft anymore is that I don't think people feel as personally invested in some of these bigger political issues, and I think it does affect the art that's created because of that.
Are there any artists out there that you want to champion that you think are sort of speaking out?
I really am liking LIZZO's new album. I think she's doing great, and her as a public person and the things she's been saying. I just started following her on Twitter. I think she's really great. JANELLE, MONÁE. There's other artists, particularly women, I think, that are aware of what's happening in the world and speaking out for women, speaking out for justice in a way that's really powerful.
I've always really just so much admired how outspoken you are mm-hmm. in your music and your interviews on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And there are some people that feel that celebrities should just shut up and sing, should keep the politics out of music. I'm sure you get a lot of flack like that in your Twitter mentions sometimes. So what do you say to people who think politics and music should be separate?
Well, the interesting part about people saying that celebrities should just shut up is that the ones that are criticizing me often voted for the guy that hosted Celebrity Apprentice to be the president of the United States with no prior experience that would lend itself to him being a good president. So if you believe that celebrities shouldn't be involved in politics, it seems like an odd choice for that guy to be your president. I think everybody should kind of listen to each other and say, what is the content behind what these people are saying? What is the intent behind what these people are saying? Not what job do they have as their main day job? And not attack them just for the fact that they do a certain job and you don't think they should have an opinion about politics.
I agree. What's your number one concern in the world or in the country right now? You're very vocal on Twitter about
It's interesting because I think my nonprofit work has been mostly around poverty and criminal justice reform. So that's obviously a big concern to me. But I think the most pressing issue in the world right now is climate change. That's the most pressing issue that is facing not only the United States, but the entire world. And if we want this world to be livable and safe, we have to come together and treat this like it's an emergency, because I think it is. So that's the issue that concerns me the most. But there's all kinds of other things I care about too. And I speak a lot about justice and equality, and I fight for those things a lot. Bottom line is, if we don't figure out climate change, a lot of these other issues are going to be exacerbated, and also they're going to seem small in comparison when we're seeing the level of climate change disasters that we're seeing now, and they're probably going to get worse.
One last question I have for you, because I've been mentioning how vocal you are on Twitter. I follow you, and I love your tweets and your wife's tweets. But obviously, you have your haters on Twitter. Everyone does.
Of course.
How do you deal with the Twitter trolls and not let it get to you?
Sometimes I just ignore it. Sometimes I employ the block and mute buttons very well. But I think I'm okay with people criticizing me, because when I'm saying the things I'm saying them because I believe in them. There's no other hidden agenda. My agenda is what it is, and I'm speaking out for things that I actually care about, and issues that I think if we fix them, if we solve them, it could help a lot of people. So I speak out because I care, and I actually want to see the change happen. So I don't mind too much when people criticize me.